That's in front of you, and that was in it was approximately 100 years ago. But it's very old, it's approximately from here. That's the main reason for this. So that is and you see which walls there, they are for growing. For growing, it's all those on each side.
Thank you. Closely at this, it's a serpent type of animal leading, and this is his body, and this is his head here, and then he's chewing on something or engorging something, and then it seems to segue into still another, yet there seem to be some three-fingered hands here, or what, I'm not sure, unless they're the feet of the next serpent in line. See, there's another serpent head there. It's also engorging something. See the metal rivets that have been used to hold the boat together in this kind of shiplap format. And these apparently were the oar holes up here. You'd think that would have to be replaced frequently from the wear and tear over time. And perhaps they had a method of doing that. There are sheets of metal down here. It looks like some metal. Maybe that's just repairs recent. Here, the tiller on the side, that's interesting. And look at the wood fitting for that. Kind of interesting. Probably a sophisticated piece of carving requiring exactly the right piece of wood. It would allow you to attach that thing, probably run it through a hole in the ship and in that fitting and hold that thing securely to it, because it took a tremendous amount of force. Same design back here. Seems to be a series of monsters, or sea something or others, like sea monsters. I wonder if they had benches in there for people to sit on when they were operating those, or whether in fact they pulled up those boards and used the cross members as seats for the oars. That looks quite possible. And then restored those for storage and sleeping areas when they weren't rowing. Probably a source of water, since that would have been a critical thing when you're out at sea. Sweating hard on oars to have water. Interesting that the oar supports for storing the oars are still intact. An amazing discovery. Just the partial remains here, but what's interesting is the huge piece of wood that would have supported the mast. It looks massive, like it goes right down. It may have been forming part of the keel at the same time. Look at the incredible grace of this boat. Its beautiful lines, sharp lines designed to cut through ocean waves and yet remain stable and carry enough people. But how beautifully it flares out. How many years did it take for them to develop these beautiful lines in these boats? I wonder how current boat architects evaluate the efficiency of these designs. Apparently an old Viking building, stout to say the least. Particularly if they were good at fitting it out so that it was airtight and reasonably watertight. This keel member goes all the way back through here. I can't see where it divides, but you would think at some point it had to be spliced, but maybe not. This is a wagon, but curiously the front axle doesn't rotate, which is really curious. It almost, you wonder if this was a beginning in this in the technology, because it seems so obvious that if you just took a kid's toy and you realize that's the part you want to turn. These are theoretically some of the earliest depictions of humans in, I guess, the art form. Although they seem a bit warped, this seems to be an adult with a baby coming in perpendicular to her waist. And they're an animal of some sort. Curious that a pot would be made up of these little riveted sections instead of larger sheets. This is a rotary queen, but it's two pieces of rock that apparently can rotate horizontally and grind grains. Huh. The gracefulness of these lines is what's amazing. Here's the example of the splicing. It's just like splicing molding along the floor. You cut it at an angle. This is bigger than the other one and in some respects more complete. Curious. There you can see how those boards come together. It must have been incredibly intricate to build that. And here again, that huge piece of wood that was for stepping the mast, but also whatever this secondary mast is. Maybe that held some kind of horizontal mast mechanism there. An amazing find. And notice you see those boards, the horizontal boards up above in the front. At the back, they're out of there. My guess is that's where people sat, or on some configuration there. And notice that there, the remnants, it looks like of holes that covered, or a device for covering these holes. There's another one there, it's seen for the first time. You can see that in the other boat. Because that would have allowed them to function in a little bit higher seas, perhaps, some way. And all of this metal riveted together in essence. How many centuries did it take to evolve this technology? How many men would this carry with supplies? Notice how the design flares here to support the positioning of this rudder. Another view of that unique piece. But the fine work, I think, on the end of this paddle. How beautiful these ships and paddles must have looked when they were first built. If you look at this one, it wasn't just a paddle. It was designed to flare. You wonder if the design was not only for strength, but to maybe give some kind of, I don't know, flex to the oars. And is this little wedging here where it went through the hole, perhaps, in war? I don't know. I'm assuming that that metal was something that we added in the restoration. With the attention to detail and the carving, these must have been beautiful when they were first built. I mean, just magnificent. Nations of design detail, like these little squares, which look like scales, but then they become rectangular mixed with a square. This more like scales. Long rectangles here, and particularly long ones there. And then here rectangles offset one row from the other. And pleasant day outside of the Viking Ship Museum, although it's clouding over pretty fast and heavily.
Thor Heydal's expeditions and look.
Trying to figure out what kind of seal they have.
So your ceiling is shiny. Are the roofing? What is it made of? You have a lot of snow here? No, the roofing, the tile. The tile of the house. Is shiny.
This is part of a relief that was found by Thor Heydal. Presumably prior to his excavation. It shows the reed boats of Peru and the east and bird depictions common to Easter Island, which was supportive of his contention that the Peruvian Indians were seagoing and would have made it to Easter Island, the premise for his trip with this boat. Raft, I think. It's an irony that in one country, in one city, at one time, we should visit two museums and look at radically different boats for which the country is known. Although the construction of this boat and its materials came far, far from Norway, but rather in Peru. Number 3, of course, Peru, and number 3A, and then Easter Island number 2, indicating the scope of his journey. So to orientate the history, the Kon Tiki was designed to sail from Peru to Easter Island to prove that Peruvian Indians had this technology and did use it for ocean travel, and that in all probability could have, if in fact, sailed from Peru to Easter Island. Ra 1 and 2 were designed to prove the possibility of the connection between Egypt and its papyrus boats and other factors to Central and South America. there were a common feature between these two cultures that he believed could have been connected by the use of papyrus boats to go from Egypt to Central America and make that connection. And several of those features were step pyramids, walls built of huge rocks joined together without mortar and with meticulous accuracy, like Chichen Itza, for example. Giant statues of human figures carved in stone, certainly something that you see in the Mayan culture and probably in the Aztec. And then boats constructed of rushes. It's somewhat culturally analogous to the geographical features between Africa and South America that indicate that at one time the plates had been together and the continents had been together. So a substantial boat, but I remember reading the difficulties of whether it would absorb so much water or would eventually collapse or get waterlogged and sink, or perhaps swell. I don't remember what the concerns were, but that would be many of them. The boat would probably be very flexible. Notice how it's all tied together with ropes, and that would have had to have been ropes that naturally were made then at that time out of hemp, probably. And here the basket technology creating the cockpit area. I have to read the book again to see the dynamics, but it's just interesting to look at something like this and realize this is the boat that did it. People with vision achieving things. The difficulty with this ship and with the Ra was trying to rediscover the technologies that the early Egyptians, in the case of Ra 1 and 2, and the early Peruvian Indians would have used. It's not just a matter of design, perhaps it was a matter of how it was the materials were assembled, how they were chosen, how they were pre-treated. A Polynesian canoe or dugout. So apparently the boat I was looking at was the one that was either Ra 1 or Ra 2, and this is actually the original Kon Tiki, which was a balsa raft, not reeds at all. Also being that very lightweight wood that's easy to carve. The raft left Callao in Peru on April 28, 47 with a crew of 6 men and 3 tons of provisions and water. They landed on the Aurora Atoll in the Tuatuma group on August 7, 1947, having successfully navigated 4,300 miles. Proving that people could have, from ancient civilization of South America, could have reached the Pacific Islands with their contemporary kinds of watercraft. And it's interesting here, the prow is built of planks. Were they also of balsa? Did they carve them there in Peru? How authentic is that? Look at the size of these logs and of the ropes. How they manufactured the ropes. If they try to do it the authentic way is an interesting question. I wonder how they steered this. And these must be some of the mechanisms here. Oh, there, I see. Looks like a roomy enough little cabin in there. What would it be like in storms? Waterproof? They had her ladder rigged so long ago as a boy or a young man that I read about this. I don't remember much. These huge logs here running the distance. This thing must have shifted and moved about. This is the underside of the raft. There you can see keels, things that function like keels. This was for investigating sharks in some kind of safety. Novels like this are always so impressive to think of the time that went into creating them, all to scale. What a sleek looking steamer that is. This was a boat made by sailors who were captured by the Nazis and forced to live on their boats, and they constructed this out of the materials available and escaped. This is a reproduction of the Vikings in Canada on Newfoundland about the year 1000, based on the archaeological excavations. And I'd heard the name before. Lance aux Meadows. About the year 1000. Well, it's certainly one of the biggest of its kind, regardless of how it's named. Petroleum. No wonder there's vast oil spills when one of these breaks up. A gas carrier. Liquefied gas should become more and more important as regular petroleum declines. Look at this ship, large enough to carry out a North Sea oil rig. What beautiful ships. This is the motor from Raoul Amundsen's polar vessel. Almost all rusted together. But it's good to have such an artifact. This is the Fram used by Amundsen and others, principally in the Arctic. The courageous men in their sailing ships. How beautiful they look as models, but how small and puny it seems to the ocean itself, particularly in the environs it went. The explosive harpoon. Boy. Deadly weapon, to say the least. The whaling boats. These intricate models of the old ships.